Hello, and it's a lovely day today, so what I thought I'd do is show you the steaming up of my old Wilesco steam tractor. This is a classic case of a toy that a parent bought many years ago. My dad bought it for me nearly 50 years ago, and it had a profound effect. I absolutely loved playing with it, which is probably what turned me into an engineer and a physicist later on. And it went missing for 30 years somewhere in my mother's house, and we've been having a bit of a clear out, and it reappeared, and my brother found it and gave it to me. And so what I thought we'd do today is see if we could steam it up again and get it driving around in the garden. So it comes in the original box, and interestingly I can see my rather childish handwriting on here with my name on it, even though I was meant to share it with my brother. It wasn't just mine. So inside here we've got the steam tractor itself, and so we'll get that steamed up in a minute. And then a few bits and pieces I need. This one runs on solid fuel, so I've got some solid fuel tablets. I've got some cylinder oil to oil it, a little funnel which is quite useful for getting water in. Here's a little trick. I use a bathroom tile to put the burner on when I'm working with the burner, and I also use one of these wash bottles from chemistry departments, which I can use with a fine nozzle to put the water in the boiler, always using deionized distilled water. And obviously I'll need over here something to light the solid fuel tablets. So let's see if we can get this thing steamed up and driving around in the garden. So, reminiscent of when I go flying, let's have a little quick walk around of this before it gets too hot to touch everything. So we've got the front steering on this, and the front steering on this model doesn't lock off. They do on some other steam engines and steam tractors. So I've put an elastic band on here, and I can lock the steering off so it goes in a straight line or a circle. I'm sure there are better ways of doing it, but it seems to work for me. We've got the funnel or chimney, and that comes out for cleaning. We've got the place where we fill the boiler and the pressure release safety valve. A valve here for turning the steam onto the cylinder and turning the steam off. A flywheel with its pulley on to drive other items. The direction lever, so this will go both forwards and backwards depending on where we position that. And then at the back there's a sight glass here which we'll look at to see how much water is in the boiler, and we're going to make sure there's always water in the boiler. We've got the whistle here, and that way is the whistle off. And then on this side you can see the single cylinder and piston here, and an oiler above that. And remember, you should always use those little nuts at the top. You should always undo them with your fingers. You shouldn't ever use pliers. I didn't really want to tell you, but we actually had one, and an uncle of ours, using it without my dad's permission, used some pliers on here and actually snapped it off, which was my dad was very upset, and we had to kind of braze bits back on. Anyway, the only other important bit, and it's not going to go without it, is the burner, and this one's got a solid fuel burner, so we'll put some solid fuel in there and get it fired up. So getting it ready for steaming, the first thing I'm going to do is oil the important bits. So if you remember, I'm going to unscrew the oiler here with my fingers, and be careful not to lose that, it's ever so tiny, and put in a few drops of cylinder oil. Okay, this is a thick oil, you mustn't use a thin one, but a thick oil. I think I did this the other day, so it's probably fairly topped up, but you get the idea. And I'll put the screw back on, and I might just put a little bit of oil on this piston rod here as well, so just a little bit there, can't do any harm, and work that in. There we go. Okay, and the valve behind as well has a little rod, so let's get that fully extended, and a little drop of oil on there as well. That's it. Okay, so everything's nicely lubricated there. So now we can get ready to put some distilled water in the boiler and get it fired up. So let's put some water in the boiler. So I'm going to undo the pressure release valve, remembering that this is always finger tight, and it's a good time just to check that it's operating okay. So I'm going to press it against the spring and see that it does operate. Put that to one side. I've got my little funnel here, which I'll pop in there, and then I'm using one of these wash bottles, and I'm going to put some distilled deionized water into the boiler. And as I do this, gone over the edge a bit there, I'm going to look in the back, I'll show you a picture of that in a minute, and just see that the sight glass is showing the water going in, and that it's not underfilled and it's not overfilled. I think the suggestion is about 3/4 full, but as long as you've got water in the boiler, that's really important. Okay, so a bit of water going in there, and it's only just coming up onto the sight glass. Some people recommend boiling distilled water and then putting that in. For heaven's sake, don't use normal tap water, certainly in this area with all the minerals that are in it, because it will completely coke everything up. So I've got deionized or distilled water. We use it for the steam iron at home as well. So squeezing that in, and what I'll do now is I'll just get a quick picture of the sight glass on the back of the boiler so you can see the water level. So the boiler's full now, and what I mean by full is 3/4 full of water. So I'll take the funnel out, double check the pressure release valve and put that back in, and being really careful not to cross thread it. It's quite a loose thread anyway, and tighten that up. And actually I lift up on the pressure release valve again here just to double check everything's okay. So let's now look at how the burner works, and that's under here beneath this rubber band I use for towing. So out comes the burner, and I'm going to put the tractor just away slightly. I do warn you, make sure you've got it sort of chocked, because I've had it nearly roll off the desk at one stage and I nearly broke it. So here's a little technique I use. I use a tile, put the burner on it, and I use these solid fuel tablets. They come out quite large, they're sort of this sort of size, and I just get a screwdriver, put it on the middle and give it a gentle tap. There we go. And what it does, it breaks it in half, and if you get it right, these halves will just fit in. That one may be a little, oh no, there we go. Okay, and we can light those and put it back underneath the boiler. Okay, so now let's get it steamed up, and it's at this stage I need to say that I'm not giving you any health and safety advice here. You really need to know how these things work to operate them safely, because it is a pressure boiler. I'm just doing what I do, but please read the instructions. These are not to be used by people who don't fully understand what's going on. And in fact, working with children in a classroom in a school, we have to have some very strict safety procedures in place, and also boiler inspections, etc. But in the right hands, used correctly, these are perfectly safe. So I'm just going to check that I've got water in the boiler, that I've done the safety valve up and that it's operating okay. I'm going to check the whistle is switched off, and I'm going to check that the steam going to the piston that drives it is also switched off. So I'm now ready to light the burner and start to boil the water in the engine itself. So let's get these tablets lit, and a bit like the old meths burners, it's a bit tricky to see whether they're lit or not. I don't think that's got going yet, but you need to be a little bit careful. I prefer to do it like this than actually light one and then try and shove it in with my fingers. So yep, I can feel the heat coming off them. It's a bit like using a Bunsen burner, but from high up. I'm not getting too close. Now this is going to get roasting hot, so I need to be careful. And if I'm going to chat for hours or take it out, it's going to go on my tile. So I'm going to check where it goes, line it up, and there we go, all the way into the steam engine, under the boiler. And now what we need to do is just sit and wait for a while for it to build up a head of steam. And I'm going to watch it. I'm not going to walk off and come back later. So it's been about 5 minutes now, and it's beginning to make all the right noises. And those of you who are familiar with these, one of the things that always sticks in your mind is the smell. It's something that only an engineer will get. If you're not into engineering, you'll think, what are you talking about? But that sort of yeah, that sort of smell of oil and heat and the fuel, etc. You never forget it, and in fact takes you back to your childhood. I like my stories. Dad used to tell me a story that one of his colleagues was a prisoner of war in the Second World War, and before the war he used to run two-stroke motorcycles, and they used to run on Castrol R oil. And he said that his friend, to remind him of home, used to put the Castrol R on the sort of log burner where he was in the prisoner of war camp, and that smell of hot oil took him back to his motorbikes, which I think if he told the story, he must have returned to them. Anyway, I noticed a few things happening. I can see bubbles in the behind the glass in the boiler, and I can see a bit of fizzing and leaking from the pressure valve, and they often say, you know, check for leaks, and there aren't any leaks. I kind of like leaks because I know that the steam pressure is not building up too high, and we've got some steam coming out the funnel, so I think we're ready to go. So this could be run as a stationary engine if we put the gears into neutral, because it's got a neutral forwards and reverse. So let's open up the steam flow. There we go. And give the flywheel a little flick. And there we go. It's running beautifully. And if we turn off the flow to the steam, we can sort of throttle it back and slow it down. And what we need to do now is get it actually running around the garden. Okay, so let's have another quick look at the gear mechanism, and there's a lever here that I perhaps didn't explain very well. It's only got two positions, neutral, and then when you pull it inwards it's in gear, and the motion forwards and backwards is controlled by how you spin the flywheel. So if you spin the flywheel forwards, it goes forwards, and if you spin the flywheel backwards, it goes backwards. And then if you want it as a stationary engine, push the lever in, it detaches the gears, and there we go, it just runs sitting there. So I do hope you enjoyed that look at my Wilesco steam tractor and steaming it up. If you've got one, do please play with it, but play safely, and maybe your children will grow up having the fascination for all things mechanical and engineering like I do.